Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. I don't know about you guys, but I am getting so sick of all of these double standards. You know, the left continues to cry about white male privilege, white privilege, this and that, but it seems as though nowadays the race that seems to be the least privileged, at least in terms of media coverage, is of course the white male. It's just as Ibram X. Kendi says, to fight discrimination with, of course, discrimination. And the most recent hostage event at a Texas synagogue really shows exactly what I'm talking about. We're gonna go there once again. If it was a white male, well then what do you think the headlines would be? We'd be hearing from every single talking head on MSNBC just how dangerous Trumpism continues to be. It's Donald Trump's fault, the extremism, the increased threat of white supremacy, and the Trump supporter and January 6th insurrection, right-wing domestic terrorism, all right, this, that, and the other. But instead, of course, we get what you'd expect. Another Islamic terrorist targeting the Jewish community, and we hear nothing but crickets. They barely cover it. And of course, most egregious of all, not only do they barely cover it, but it seems as though they were actively trying to cover it up. And once again, the only thing that gets them to finally admit the truth is public pressure. Even the FBI. The FBI is so willing to label Trump supporters as domestic terrorists, whether it's the Proud Boys who have no history of violence whatsoever or any extremist views, and are constantly under attack from actual left-wing terrorists, or whether it's parents of young school children who don't want their children indoctrinated with CRT nonsense. The FBI is so quick to label them as domestic terrorists, but in this case an Islamic extremist who shouldn't have even been in the US in the first place targets a synagogue, and they give him the benefit of the doubt. Well, we don't know, folks. We need all of the facts. We can't exactly say why a Muslim man would take hostages in a synagogue. Absolutely stupid. Let me show you guys all of the nonsense that's going on here, and let's continue to expose this horrific double standard. But before we get into any of it, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers, and with that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so for those of you that are completely out of the loop and not following any of this stuff, the TLDR, the too long didn't read synopsis, is that a Muslim man who came from the UK, by the way with a criminal record, took multiple hostages at a Texas synagogue, and after hours of hostage negotiations, well, let's just say the man didn't get out of it alive. And after the events, the FBI came out with a public statement saying this.
We do believe from our engagement with this subject that he was singularly focused on one issue, and it was not specifically related to the Jewish community, but we're continuing to work to find motive, and we will continue on that path. In terms of the resolution of the incident, the hostage taker is deceased.
Now, it's one thing to say we're not going to speculate and we don't know what's going on here. It's another to essentially declare that the situation was not specifically related to the Jewish community. Individuals at a Texas synagogue got taken hostage. Oh, but it didn't really have anything to do with the Jewish community. But they release a statement, a public statement to the press, that it had nothing to do with the Jewish community. That's just wacko. And of course, the FBI was then blasted. It seems as though, once again, people on Twitter somehow have better information and more intel than the FBI. Andy No tweets, FBI seems very poorly informed to say that at this point, considering the suspect demanded the release of Muslim sister, Afia Sadiqui. She is a convicted jihadi who is so anti-Semitic that she demanded jurors for her trial be DNA tested to exclude Jewish people. Christina Summers writes, he was seeking the release of a virulent anti-Semite and convicted terrorist, Aifa Sadiqui. She blamed Jews for everything. Likely he did too. Ari Hoffman writes, so an Islamic terrorist who took Jewish hostages at a synagogue on the Jewish Sabbath in order to release an anti-Semitic terrorist was not connected to the Jewish community. Give me a break. Do you guys believe your own BS? And it goes on and on and on, with even Joe Biden coming out and saying this.
Do you know why he targeted that specific synagogue?
Well, no, I don't. We don't have. I don't think there is sufficient information to know about why he targeted that synagogue, why he insisted on the release of someone who's been in prison for over 10 years, why he was engaged, why he was using anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli comments. We just don't have enough facts.
That there isn't sufficient information to know why that he targeted the synagogue. Lefties on Twitter then immediately pushing Islamophobia to the top of the Twitter trending tab, as if there isn't sufficient information already. Absolutely stupid. Then of course, immediately, like clockwork, breaking after outcry, FBI admits the Jewish community was targeted in synagogue hostage taking. This is a terrorism-related matter in which the Jewish community was targeted and is being investigated by the Joint Terrorism Task Force. How was that not immediately assumed? Well, I'll tell you, it's once again this woke nonsense that continues to corrupt everything left-wingers get their hands on. Oh, we can't jump to conclusions. We might be profiling. It might just be Islamophobia, irrational fear, when it's clearly none of that. What it is basic common sense putting two and two together. There really could not have been any other explanation. Well, I mean, there could have been, but there's really only one conclusion to jump to. There's really only one explanation that makes sense, given the information. But instead, left-wingers would rather virtue signal and continuously give the benefit of the doubt. Well, it seems as though they give the benefit of the doubt to pretty much anybody who's not a white male. A Muslim extremist commits a horrible act and left-wingers in the media, well, they don't want to jump to conclusions, even giving the benefit of the doubt, as well as the FBI. But then a perceived white man in Boulder, Colorado, commits one of the worst atrocities in decades, and the media jumps on him as a perceived white male. For those of you guys that remember, this was his face. Then, of course, his identity comes out, and what was his name? Ahmad al-Aliwi Alisa. Not exactly a Connor Smith, who spends too much time at Trump rallies. And then all of a sudden, the media ignores the incident. This precious left-wing narrative that the white man is the greatest threat to democracy and national security is such a farce. It's totally manufactured. Such a ridiculous narrative, but so precious to these disingenuous Democrats that somehow white supremacy is still to blame. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel suggests that white supremacy is to blame for Texas synagogue Islamist attack.
We have seen an incredible rise in rhetoric that is anti-Semitic being trafficked all around the country. And in the case of Michigan, that is why I established the first hate crimes and domestic terrorism unit anywhere in the state, one of the first in the country, because we were seeing an exponential rise in hate crimes and an exponential rise in the formation and the membership of these extremist organizations, many of which are white supremacy organizations, and they traffic in hatred against Jews and other minorities.
I mean, we're talking about clear Islamic radicalism, but Michigan's Attorney General, Dana Nessel, is brought on to speak on MSNBC and immediately takes the conversation towards this boogeyman of white supremacy that doesn't even exist. Or maybe it exists, but it's so small, it's so insignificant, it's so exaggerated and manufactured that the only way it even stays alive is by connecting incidents like this that have nothing to do with it with this imaginary threat of extremist white nationals. I mean, this incident happened in Texas. Why is the Michigan Attorney General even speaking about what's going on in Texas? She has absolutely no connection to it whatsoever, no relevant information to bring, other than to push this completely phony, ridiculous left-wing media narrative. The double standard is so horrific, these people are so dishonest, that the word Islamic extremism can't even come out of their mouths. Even when it's clearly the elephant in the room, they immediately go to, but more white supremacy. It's just ridiculous. In the very, very rare scenarios where there is an act of white radicalism, I mean, it's so rare I literally can't even think of a single situation off the top of my head. But during those times, here's another complete double standard. It is immediately condemned by all sides. Of course, the media will blow it up and try to connect it to Donald Trump and right-wing blah blah blah, you know the deal. But in the much more often incident of left-wing radicalism, Islamic extremism, or other similar instances, well, it seems as though the media tries to cover it up. And then you have this ridiculous notion of Islamophobia being pushed around, that the real threat isn't the extremism, but rather the prejudice against Muslim people that follows. And every single time, the individuals who commit these acts somehow at the end of the day become victims. Man claiming to be the brother of Texas synagogue terrorist says suspect freed hostages before being shot. And although my brother was suffering from mental health issues, we were confident that he would not harm the hostages. So somehow he's the victim, and federal agents dealing with the hostage situation are supposed to give the individual the benefit of the doubt that he's not going to harm anyone. Absolutely crazy. We're even seeing reports of a Facebook Muslim community that's now mourning the individual's death. And all I have to say is that if that same thing was happening during a true instance of white extremism, well, the outrage would be tremendous. It happens in these instances, and nobody even seems to talk about it or care. It's completely despicable. And now we're even learning that the family of the individual, Malik Faisal, is now asking how he was even able to enter the US with a criminal record. How did he get in? And if that doesn't add more to the argument of why border security is so important, then I don't know what does. All I have to say to end this video is, we are truly living in a clown world, now aren't we? That's what I got for you guys though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.